You're watching Radioactive right here on YouTube. My name is Victoria. With me right now, I'm joined by Dre DIMura. How are you doing, Dre?
I'm unstoppable. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited to have you on the show today. And if you don't know and if people don't know who you are a touring session musician. And I'll get to that a bit later in the interview. But I just want to start off by talking about kind of how you got into playing guitar and how you got into music and at what age.
Cool. Yeah. So I grew up in a musical household. My dad's a musician. He's a pianist. And there was always a guitar around. There were, shakers and maracas and keyboards and things. So I played around with stuff, but I didn't really start gravitating toward the electric guitar and practicing until I was 12. And it was really because of the Guitar Hero games that I discovered all this music that was like electrifying to me and I got really excited about. And then I wanted to learn those songs on actual guitar. And I had there was like a the $99 guitar starter pack just sitting around the house, and picked it up and learned like a bunch of Iron Maiden and pop punk stuff, Blink-182, Deep Purple, Cream, all sorts of older rock and pop punk stuff, which was, the most relevant music when I was growing up. So that's kind of how I started out.
Mm-hmm. And who would you say the bands that you listened to back then, who would be like your most influential bands?
Specifically bands that were contemporary or bands that I had discovered that were older?
Either or.
Definitely My Chemical Romance was a big one for me, especially because they were from New Jersey and I'm from New Jersey. So it's kind of like if they could do it, they're on TRL and MTV and playing the arenas with the Used and stuff. Like, it was inspiring to us because we looked up to them. And that was one of the first bands that actually my neighbor showed me. I'm Not Okay, I Promise. And then I'd come home from school and put on, at the time, it was Fuse TV, was kind of where, like, I don't know if it was owned by MTV, but they had moved all of the actual music, to like VH1 and Fuse. So that was where you would go to watch music videos after school. So I'd put that on and I saw like the music video for Helena, and it just blew me away. Like the cinematic element and the music and how heavy it was and just everything about it, like the way they looked, like it was really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what do you think of their new song that they released?
Oh, I haven't listened to it.
You haven't listened to it yet?
No, I haven't listened to it.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, I'll check it out today.
You have to. Got to. And as far as like favorite guitarists go, who would you say were like your most influential players?
Yeah, so I'm a bit across the board on this. Jimmy Page, obviously from Led Zeppelin, was a huge inspiration to me. It's something I had to like actively work to filter out of my own playing as I drop my pen. As I kind of found my own voice on guitar. What I loved about Jimmy was how creative he was and how he used the guitar almost like an orchestra. He would layer all these different guitar parts and kind of push the boundaries of the guitar as in terms of production, and how he used the studio as an instrument. And I thought that was so cool. And just the mystique around the band and the imagery and, all of it was really inspiring to me. And, I grew up with, a lot of the stuff that, my dad showed me, like Yes and Eric Clapton and Deep Purple. And I got really into Metallica, obviously. But I liked the music and I liked the guitar sound, but I didn't really understand or know the guitar players yet. Like it was Richie Blackmore and Clapton and Kirk Hammett or James Hetfield. And then kind of when I got into Iron Maiden and Black Sabbath, that's when I started to like put names to the sounds and like start to study, the whole family tree of guitar. And I just had this like voracious appetite for anything. It didn't matter the genre. So I got like really into Django Reinhardt, Wes Montgomery, Eric Johnson. I got really into, like the shredding guitar players. Like Yngwie Malmsteen was a huge inspiration for me, and Paul Gilbert. And, I love all sorts of guitar players. So like anything I could find that had guitar on it, whether it was acoustic or electric, distorted, clean, jazz, funk, fusion, rock, metal, country, classical, like sign me up.
Yeah. And after you started playing guitar for a while, how did you kind of get into doing session work and deciding that was the path that you wanted to take?
Yeah, so I knew kind of what a session guitar player was, actually, because of Jimmy Page. He started out as a session guitar player in London in the 60s. And the definition of what a session musician is has really changed over time. Obviously, it began as, really in the studio. You would go in, or actually even before that, a session player would have been someone that, was paid to recreate written music, manuscripts live. And then you have, the boom of the record industry, and you have musicians coming in and, being paid to play down charts and, play arrangements, and they do 5 songs in 3 hours and get paid and leave. And that really evolved with home recording and the way that touring has changed. So it was very different from the kind of rose-colored world glasses that I had on when I was reading about the 60s British blues boom and the Wrecking Crew and what was happening in America with players like Tommy Tedesco and oh my God, I must have Carole King, Carol Kay, and just all of these amazing session music, the Funk Brothers, James Jamerson, they were all these studio bands, but that whole model was gone by the time in the 2010s, late 2000s, when I was a teenager, and I was learning about this stuff, and I wanted to pursue it. So I didn't really know what that would look like, but I saw a video of Nuno Betancourt from Extreme playing with Rihanna on the Grammys, and I thought that was so cool. I was like, okay, so I could be a rock guy or a rock guitar player, but play with pop artists and do these live arrangements and things like that. And that's kind of what inspired me to move out to LA. And I had a friend actually at the time who had gone to LA from New Jersey to audition for Lady Gaga's band. And it was him and his buddy from Philly went to LA, and they both got down to the final round. His friend got the gig on drums, still is her drummer to this day, Spanky. But my buddy, the bass player, it was between him and another guy, and the other guy doubled on synthesizer, and they went with him. Mm-hmm. But I heard him talk about it, and kind of when I was deciding if I wanted to move, to Philly, New York, LA, I texted him, and I was like, hey man, this is something I'm really curious about. I know that you went out there and you auditioned for all this stuff, and you toured with these bands and stuff. So is that could I do that? And it was crazy because he didn't respond for a month. And it was the summer in 2014, and I had a band at the time, a local band, and the band fell apart a month after I texted this guy, and that day he texted me back, and he was like, "You should totally move to LA. You could totally do it." And I was like, "That's enough for me, that's cosmic." And I think it was a full moon that night. It was I was like, "All right." So I made the decision, and tied up the loose ends and moved out to LA, and kind of started to get the lay of the land and figure out how things worked, and what my conception of a session musician was, how that differed from reality. And kind of immediately I got into this whole TV thing, which wasn't exactly what I moved out there to do, but it's a type of session, I guess, doing on-camera work as a guitar player. So I would kind of mime along, in TV shows and movies and commercials when they would have, music on screen, or they would need a band, on camera to, yeah. It's called a visual instrumental. My girlfriend's in sync licensing, so it's called a visual instrumental. I would get hired to do these, these parts. So I worked with David Fincher, the director on HBO, and did a McDonald's commercial and had a show on Nickelodeon. And that was the first, year that I was in LA. I was really, doing this because it was, helping me financially, and it kind of just happened. But I didn't really do any gigs. I didn't, have sessions. I was meeting people and trying to, beginning to understand what a musical director was, and who could actually hire you, and how you could get gigs, how you could tour and things. But it really didn't take off for about a year. But I mean, to make a long story long, that's more or less how I went from kind of reading about this thing and hearing about it to, living it and figuring it out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, you kind of had a band that fell apart. Did that kind of play into you wanting to do session work? When did you kind of decide that you wanted to do a session work opposed to starting your own band?
That's a great question. And yeah, it totally did. That was a huge reason that I had decided that was the path I wanted to take at that point. Growing up, being into bands, being obsessed with bands, the Beatles, Zeppelin, Stones, Metallica, Iron Maiden, Blink, you know, you name it. I wanted to follow that model, and I really wanted that band experience and the camaraderie that you get from the band, but I hadn't lived it yet, where I really understood also the challenges of being in a band. You know, like it is really like a family, and it's sometimes hard to navigate those relationships. And I had, you know, 2 or 3 bands actually that kind of failed. I mean, more than that, but like 2 or 3 kind of serious, you know, bands that I thought really were going to become something and had potential, that failed. And it was a good learning experience for me, because it made me realize that what I really wanted to do was be a player. You know, I wanted to play, and I wanted to write and produce, and I wanted to collaborate with other people, but I didn't want to be like tied to the band dynamic, because it wasn't, in my experience, kind of what I dreamed of, as far as this, like, you know, you start a band with your buddies in the garage when you're teenagers, and then you like tour the world, you know. And I'm sure, you know, that still does happen sometimes for some people. But it kind of definitely pushed me in that direction, where I was like, you know what, I think I want to just try, you know, working with artists, and, you know, as opposed to trying to launch this thing from the ground up with a band.
And like being in a band, there's obviously, like you said, there's the pros and cons because you're so close to each other. And obviously with being a session musician, it's probably the same. So what are some of those pros and cons?
To being in a band or being a session musician?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great question. I would say the pros are, you know, you don't quite get bored. There's a lot of diversity and variety in the, you know, the types of artists that you can work with. You can definitely like bounce around genres, and there's also a more immediate financial payoff, where, you know, you're being hired for a session, you're being paid for your work, which is, you know, really validating as an artist or as a musician, just to make money or make a living or a partial living, whatever. You know, with music is like that, just in and of itself is so cool. You know, with a band, that definitely takes a lot more time, and you're working a lot more for the equity, you know, being in the band. I guess on the other side of that, there is that pride of ownership when you have a band, when you break your own band, you know, it's like, I made this. At the same time with the sessions, you know, there is that more immediate, you know, opportunity to tour, to play bigger shows, to kind of get your name out there and collaborate and work with a bunch of different people. The cons to that would obviously be, you know, you don't have that equity. And it's not just a pride of ownership thing. It's also a financial thing on the business side, where, you know, you're not necessarily writing, you don't get points, you don't own any of the master recordings, you know. If you're playing with an artist or a band where you're just filling in, you're working for whatever rate you're being paid. And then when the tour ends, you're going to go home and you have to figure it out. You know, you're going to have to find the next tour, or look for other work, or get a part-time job, or do something, you know, and that happens all the time. That's, you know, much more common than you would think. So, you know, we're more or less being paid our full-time salary when we're touring, but you're not touring full-time, you know? So it's an interesting balancing act, where there's no like ancillary compensation to what you're doing, you know, as a player. And, you know, my friends that are in bands, that have been in bands for a long time, they have like this other revenue stream, you know, whether it's the merch, or maybe from streaming if they're doing well on, you know, Spotify, Apple Music, or whatever it may be. So there's definitely that, you know, that pride of ownership, and also the equity that you have being in a band. And then on the session side, you have like the variety, and you have, you know, better immediate compensation for your work, but you definitely end up, you know, sometimes searching for the next thing, and trying to figure that out. So that's how I would say.
And overall, out of like every aspect of the music industry, what do you like most about being a guitarist in this industry?
I mean, I just love the guitar, you know. I don't know if I would even correlate it to the industry, because as far as the industry goes, like we're not a rare commodity, and that's, you know, it's the supply and demand, right? Like there are so many guitar players, and there's just more and more guitar players as time goes on. Like it's, you know, very competitive. And I mean, that's part of what made me want to move to LA. Like I like, you know, I thrive on competition, and I wanted to prove myself, and there was like that healthy motivation. But but it's like a thankless job, you know, like it's pretty competitive. So I would say I just love the guitar. And then what I love about being a guitarist in the industry is that I play guitar. You know,
Yeah. And you've played with quite a few artists. So can you just list a few of those?
Yeah, absolutely. I've played with Diamante, Palais Royale, Gloria Gaynor, Dee Snider, Steve Howe, Jolyn Turner, Sorrow, Alexa Villa, let's see.
A lot. Yeah.
Walks. I played with Dragonforce. Yeah. That's a couple.
Mm-hmm. And do you have like specific artists that were like highlights? Like, I can't believe I played with them.
Yeah, I mean, sitting in with Dragonforce was pretty crazy. I'd say that was like a full circle moment, and one of the only times like in recent memory that I got really nervous before I played, because it wasn't like a gig, you know, it wasn't a show, like there wasn't a rehearsal. I wasn't, you know, on a paid job and you have rehearsals and you go out and do the thing and you're like prepared and it's a job, you know. It was like a dream kind of thing, where it had been, you know, 15 years ago. I heard Through the Fire and the Flames and Guitar Hero for the first time. And like, I showed it to my guitar teacher and I asked him if he could teach me how to play that. He's like, nah, I can't play it. But, but like, here's some other stuff that's like that. So that was like, that's like their song was like my gateway into, you know, guitar oriented music and excuse me, opened so many doors for me, as far as the stuff that I got like, you know, hip to. So that was like a pretty crazy experience to play with them, you know?
Mm-hmm. And you also mentioned you played with Diamante and Palais Royale. Can you just kind of tell me what it was like playing with those and just the experience overall?
Yeah, absolutely. So I played with Palais for, I did a tour with them with Metro Station in 2016, and it was one of the most fun experiences I've ever had on the road. They weren't quite, you know, at the level that they're at now. Obviously, they're, you know, hugely successful.
Yeah.
Which I knew was gonna happen for them because I could see like the work ethic and the dedication and kind of the whole nucleus of the thing they had going on. You know, they had isolated like the ethos of rock and roll, you know, but by way of, you know, pop punk and emo and kind of everything we grew up with in the 2000s. And they were doing things that were so old that they felt new, like that they were new to the audience. And that was the first time I saw that, because I grew up on all this, you know, for lack of a better term, classic rock. And to me, it was just, that was what it was. And I knew so much about it. But then I toured with Palais, and there's this really young fan base that, you know, didn't know who the Who are, or who Aerosmith were, or Led Zeppelin, or, you know, Iggy Pop. But they knew who Palais was. And it was like a new thing to them. And I was like, that's cool, because then that's when you have the full circle, where something becomes like viable again, because it wasn't their parents' music, you know, like it was still their music.
Yeah.
So it was a really eye-opening tour, and it was really cool to kind of be there when it was happening. So when I toured with them, we were supporting Metro. It was a club tour. And at the time they had this like airport shuttle bus, like a, you know, that takes you to the rental car, the hotel when you fly.
Yeah.
But they had like gutted and turned into like a live-in bus with bunks and things like that. But it was very, you know, like MacGyver, you know, put together. And it was an experience. It was really, really cool. I learned a lot on that tour. And that was the first time that I like really let go on tour and just like surrendered to the fact that you're just out there for a long time. Like I had done tours before that where I struggled with just the homesickness or like being away. Like I had gone to Australia for 5 weeks and done a tour there when I was like 21 or something. And it was like hard. It's like 10,000 miles away from home, you know, like it was an experience. But that Palais tour, like I have so many good memories of that tour. I actually hung out with them the other night at the Ryman. They played with Youngblood in Charlotte Sands. And we were hanging out on the bus and just like haven't seen each other in years. But that tour just came up, and then for like an hour we just talked about that tour. Like everyone had the same, you know, like light bulb moments of like, oh my God, in Atlanta, and then oh that thing, and like yeah, then this in New York, like oh my God, you remember that? Like it was a great tour. It was really cool.
Yeah. And do you have any like favorite show moments? And it doesn't necessarily have to be with the same artist, just in general.
Favorite show moments,
or just favorite shows you've played, certain venues, anything like that.
Yeah, good question. Well, on the second Diamante tour that I did in 2019, it was an amphitheater tour with Breaking Benjamin, Chevelle, 3 Days Grace. And, you know, I had grown up with those bands. A lot of my friends were really into those bands. So that was cool to kind of do the thing where you go out with your heroes, you know. But the coolest thing about that tour was that we played the two amphitheaters that I saw like two of my first big concerts at in New Jersey. So we played at the, I don't know, you know, they change names like every year because there's a new like corporate sponsor, but at the time it was called the Susquehanna Bank Center. I think it's now called like BB&T Amphitheater in Camden, New Jersey, on the border of, you know, Philadelphia and New Jersey. So we played there, and I saw Iron Maiden there in the front row in 8th grade. And then we also played the PNC Bank Arts Center, which is another big amphitheater in New Jersey. And my dad had actually gone to concerts there in the 70s. So that was like very, very cool. He came to that show, and we walked the grounds together, like walked up to the top of the lawn and like looked out at it, and just like had a really cool moment where it was like, I'm doing it, you know, like I'm here, I'm doing the thing. And
yeah,
before the show in Camden, I went to the spot that I stood in when I was 13 watching Iron Maiden, and I just like stood there for a second and like took in the moment. And those are pretty cool moments, you know, when you get to play somewhere where you were, you know, a fan, and you had an experience with a band that they moved you, and then you ended up here. Now you have that opportunity to give it back. And you know, you don't know, maybe there's going to be another kid in that audience that is going to have that same experience you did, and 15 years from now they'll be on stage, you know. So that was one of my favorite moments.
Yeah, for sure. And like you were listing off, you've played with many bands, so you must have lots of crazy tour stories. Do you have any that you would like to share?
Yeah. I have to be careful with these. Yeah, I have some good stories. So when I did the Palais tour, like I said, the shuttle bus was like very, you know, unreliable. There had been a lot of problems with it. So before I joined the tour, the transmission had gone on the bus in Colorado, and they had to have it replaced. And there was a blown out tire on the way to Dallas, and the thing like literally caught on fire at one point. Like it was a mess. Amazing, but you know, so we were at a gas station in like New Mexico or something, and I went inside to get a cup of coffee, and I come out of the gas station, and the bus is on the other side of the highway at another gas station. And you know, when you like the gas stations off the interstate or whatever, you have like, you know, 2 gas stations, and there's like 4 lanes of traffic, right?
Okay, yeah.
High speed traffic. So it's like on the other side. I'm like, oh, maybe, you know, this one didn't have the right gas or something. I'm like, oh, this is weird. So I like run across the highway like Frogger, you know, with my coffee or whatever, like to get the bus. And Remington and Emerson and the driver are like hunched over, like panting for breath, like in tears, outside of the little convenience store at the gas station. And I'm like, what happened? So apparently, I guess the bus like just shifted into neutral and just started rolling.
Oh my God.
With the gas pump in while the driver was out of the bus filling it up.
Oh my God.
And Remington and Emerson were asleep inside the bus, and they felt it moving, and I guess kind of like woke up like, wait, like we shouldn't be moving. We're like parked, you know, like kind of subconsciously, and jumped up, but it had rolled across the entire parking lot through all 4 lanes of traffic into the other gas station. And Remington like dove over the front of the bus with his hand and pushed the brake literally like it was 5 feet away from the glass windows of the store. It would have like plowed right into the convenience store. And yeah,
didn't even get hit. Didn't even get
That
hit.
was a moment.
That's crazy.
It didn't get hit.
That's crazy.
It's the craziest thing. Like, we knew we had to just like truck through that tour, you know, despite all the challenges, because it was, yeah, it was like we were anointed, you know, like there's no way, like we were Achilles getting dipped in the cauldron to be invincible. You know, like there was nothing going to stop us on that one. I have one more story from that tour, actually. We were in Tampa, Florida, and played the show, and there was this guy there who had just sold his company and made like millions of dollars, and he bought a house outside of Tampa, and it was Burt Reynolds' house, from Gunsmoke, the actor with the mustache, and it was like a 70s it was like a 70s shag pad, literally like plush orange carpets, like the 70s fireplace, records everywhere. And Burt Reynolds it didn't look like he had even moved out, because like all of his artwork and everything was still standing up. His record collection was there. And he had pictures of himself all over the house, like with his shirt off, with like his hairy chest out, like these like glamour shots, like hung up of himself in the house. And I thought this was the craziest thing ever. And like his jet skis were still in down the little like lagoon or whatever it was down there. It was so weird. It was such a weird time. Yeah, and then he passed away like a few years after that. But I remember thinking that was like, those are those moments where you're like, okay, I'm in the Matrix.
Yeah. And you've played with many artists of different genres. So do you have a favorite kind of genre to play and one that you're most comfortable with?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I love playing rock music, and that's my heart and soul. I actively, work to kind of exist outside of that mold. So I'm always incorporating other genres and working on other stuff, like especially as a producer. I do a lot of pop and like down tempo stuff and hip hop stuff, because I don't want to live too closely to my inspirations. Like I want to, explore other things, but like in my heart and soul, the thing that I like feel the most at home with and that I enjoy playing the most is rock music, like raise hell, turn it up. Let's get some fuzzy guitars and some squealies and some ripping solos and big John Bonham drums and stuff like that. So that's definitely my favorite thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like you're on TikTok as well. And I feel like you show that quite a bit in your videos. So can you just tell me a bit about what it's like for you to be a TikToker now as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So that, TikTok happened kind of during COVID for me. And it was a huge blessing. Like it changed my life in so many ways. And kind of while the world was trying to figure out what was going on and a lot of people in our business were really struggling, I had, that came to me, and that was a game changer in a lot of ways, because it opened up this whole other creative outlet. And also this whole other, financial outlet as far as, helping me get by in a time when there was no live music. There wasn't really the opportunity to tour and do sessions and things like that. And it was, hugely transformative, because I had been kind of just touring and playing nonstop for so long. And I've always been, creative in that way with video and things like that. And did a lot of acting when I was in LA, like I said, like doing the, commercials, and I had done like some independent films and student films. And I would always make like little home movies when I was a kid and stuff. So that kind of came full circle, where I had this opportunity to do that. And now I had an audience, which was so cool. So yeah, TikTok's been going on for, I had an interview yesterday where I figured this out. I think like 20 months, like a year and a half.
Okay.
Ish. It's a toddler, almost a toddler. Getting into the terrible twos here. But yeah, so it's been almost 2 years, and it's been really, really cool.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any favorite videos that you made? Because you'll do like the come to sound check with me videos, or you'll do more informational videos. Do you have any favorites?
Yeah, so I love doing the more creative cinematic stuff, there's, the educational stuff is really cool, because I love bringing people behind the curtain and kind of, giving that experience. Like when I would, the movies and shows that I was obsessed with when I was a kid, like the Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and Star Wars and, you know, all these things, like I would just want to watch the special features. Like, you know, you would get the DVD or the Blu-ray and there would be 2 discs and one would have the movie and one would have like the whole behind the scenes thing. And I would just want to watch like how they made it. Cause I was so fascinated by that process and I wanted to do that so badly. So having that platform to like show, like, you know, to do that for others is awesome. I love, you know, showing what, you know, what we do behind the scenes backstage with sound check or the recording process or in your monitors. And that's awesome. There's also the joy of, you know, creating fantasy and fiction, and coming up with scripts and creating these characters that I play on there. And that's something that I've actually been doing more of recently and has been getting a great response from the following and from TikTok with, like, I have this new series where I'm doing Harry Potter as if it was
I saw that.
like School of Rock, basically.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would say favorite videos. I have this one video, it's not even a crazy video, but I did the duet with the cat. I did like Angel of Death by Slayer with this cat that was like trending on TikTok because it was like, meow.
Yeah.
And I immediately was like, oh, the beginning of Angel of Death, like Tom Araya does that, you know, big scream. And I was like, I got to do it. So, so I filmed that one night, like right after we moved into this house. I didn't even have anything set up. So I like created a fake, like I put my desk here and like put all of my possessions on it so it looked like I had like an actual studio and just like threw the camera up and went for it. And that video blew up. And I love that video because it's like, it's not super produced. It's not like crazy, you know, it's just like TikTok at its best. You know, it's like using the whole thing with TikTok is how democratic it is and how, you know, everybody becomes a part of the creative experience. You know, it's not just like that there's creators and there's the audience, you know, like it's really one. And, you know, when you do a duet like that, that's the coolest thing. I mean, I've done a lot of those too. Like I did one with Charlie Puth and, you know, like that's the kind of stuff that I think is the most native to TikTok and is really cool to interact with other creators. And then the audience becomes a part of that too, because then your followers start duetting that video and they're adding drums and they're adding bass and, you know, reacting to it and stuff. So that's one of my favorites. That one's pinned on my page. It's at the top there if you want to check it out. Yeah.
And aside from doing session work and TikTok, you're also releasing a new single. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah. So I have a new song coming out on June 10th. It's called Polyjuice Potion. It's an instrumental song. It's the first instrumental that I've released in ever, truly. I mean, I tried when I was a teenager. One day maybe I'll do a TikTok where I'll expose my 15-year-old instrumental guitar music that I tried to make. But yeah, I you know, I try to create as much as I can outside of, you know, work and TikTok and just try and make some time to just like, you know, produce stuff and work on song starters. And I had this idea to kind of take, you know, samples of, you know, let a sample or a synthesizer kind of drive the track, but still have it be like a guitar centric track. Because so much guitar music is, you know, based around the riff, which is kind of the identity of the guitar in a way, right? Like we think of the guitar riff, like whether it's Whole Lotta Love or Seven Nation Army or I don't know, let's Mood, you know, 24K Golden, like, you know, to give a more, you know, relevant reference, but it's that, you know, like it's driven by the guitar riff. And I was like, well, what if the guitar was more like the MC or the vocalist or the, you know, like what if the guitar came in as these like colorful explosions, as opposed to like being the driving force behind the track. So I experimented with, you know, like sampling the Beatles and Doja Cat and all these other things and created this like really cool track. And then, you know, worked the guitar into the track. And I'm really proud of it. I think it's really, really cool. I think the playing is really cool. It's probably the most authentic to me thing that I've put out, where I feel like it's really like my voice on the guitar. You know, I've released music as a solo artist, as a vocalist, as a songwriter. But you know, the guitar it has always been and will be like my voice. So it's really cool to put something out where I feel like I'm speaking authentically with my instrument.
Yeah. And as far as the rest of this year goes, kind of what is your plan from now till January?
Oh, let's see. So I have a show at the Troubadour on the 31st. I don't know when this is going to air. It'll probably be past. But I'm playing with an artist named Adam Jensen at the Troubadour. I have some appearances at the NAMM show coming up in June, where I'm actually going to premiere the song and do some demos for Ultimate Ears, who I'm a brand ambassador with them. And they're one of my main endorsers. I've worked with them for like 3 or 4 years. They're amazing. So I'm going to do some NAMM stuff, put the single out. I have a featured solo on a song that's coming out on June 3rd with my friends in Rose Colored World, RCW. They're like a pop punk band in LA. They're amazing. So I wrote a song with them and did the solo on the song, and that comes out on the 3rd. And then after that, I mean, it's really just, I don't know. We'll see. Everything happens so quickly.
Yeah.
If you had asked me a month ago what I'd have coming up now, I wouldn't have known any of this, so it's a rapidly changing industry. I don't have anything like on the books right now beyond that, but we'll see what happens. I'm just excited to keep creating, and I'll probably put out more music and do some more sessions, and there'll probably be some touring and stuff in the summer or the fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm super excited to see what you're all going to be doing for the rest of this year.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.